Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Holi Mubarak.
A happy Holi to all of you, and we hope you've had a safe Holi. Indians all over the world celebrating this festival of colours. But for us in the news business, every day is a news day, so we celebrate festival rooms as we track the big stories around the world. Our focus remains on Ukraine and the war there. The war is showing no signs of ending. It is in fact getting worse by the day. Now, western cities in Ukraine are coming under attack. Cities like Lviv, which were believed to be relatively safe till now. More countries are offering mediation. Washington is making more dire predictions. US President Joe Biden spoke to Chinese President Xi Jinping today. And now such calls are also coming under scrutiny because in the UK, 2 top ministers received hoax calls. A deepfake video of President Zelensky is asking people to surrender. This war is being fought on many, many levels. The narrative war, the cyber war, they're all intensifying. On Gravitas tonight, we'll bring you up to speed with what's happening, starting with what has become of Ukraine.
Дождались, и сейчас приехал. А двое...
Day 23 of the war in Ukraine. Where is Vladimir Putin's invasion going? The answer depends on who you ask. Russia says its offensive has been a success. Ukraine claims Russian forces are making no progress. The militaries of both countries are still fighting each other. The diplomats are discussing the possible terms for truce. The West claims none of these negotiations are going to work. They say Vladimir Putin is planning a more aggressive offensive, one that could possibly clear the path for a regime change in Kiev. So what is happening on the battleground? We begin tonight with the top 10 updates. Number 1, more missile strikes in Kiev. Once again, a residential complex was hit. 1 person was killed, 4 others were wounded. Kiev's mayor was at the scene today. His name is Vitaly Klitschko. He's a former world boxing champion. As a boxer, he never held his punches. And as a mayor, he's sticking by those rules. The target of his punches this time was Vladimir Putin. This is what he told the WION team on the ground.
If we're talking about mistake, his mistake last morning was a mistake. 24 hours ago, 2 days ago was mistake. Huge mistake. Destroyed the Kharkiv and Mariupol. How many mistakes they do it? How many civilians have to killed? And after that to explain about mistake from Russian forces.
Meanwhile, Russian forces are moving towards western Ukraine. That's update number 2. Lviv was targeted today. This city is a humanitarian hub, a safe haven of sorts for those who are displaced in Ukraine. Many believe the city will not be targeted, but today Russian missiles reached Lviv too. They fell near the city's airport. An aircraft repair plant was destroyed. There was black smoke everywhere. This is near Ukraine's border with Poland. The mayor of Lviv has appealed for help.
It is an attack on Lviv, a humanitarian hub with at least 200,000 displaced people who have already fled the fighting zone. And this blow is a confirmation that they are not at war with the Ukrainian army, but with the civilians, children, women and displaced people.
A no-fly zone could protect Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky has been asking for it. The West has refused. And Russia is making the most of it. That's update number 3. Russia has established its own no-fly zone. This is in the separatist-controlled Donbas region. The objective is clear. It knows Ukraine's weakness is the sky, so it wants to dominate the airspace. The next major escalation could happen in the high seas, we're told. That's update number 4. Reports say Russian forces are planning a lightning advance. The Russian Navy has a major role here. The plan, we are told, is this. There's a major build-up of Russian naval forces near the coastal city of Odessa. From Odessa, they will move east to surround the Ukrainian forces in Donetsk and Luhansk, the Donbas region. What's the endgame? Encircle Ukraine's army from all directions, on the ground, on the high seas and in the skies. Russia wants to claim total control and dictate terms. The U.S. has made some dire predictions. Update number 5. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has issued a warning. He says Russia has no intention of stopping this offensive and that the Kremlin was never serious about negotiating. Blinken says Russia could use chemical weapons in Ukraine next. Pro-Russian mercenaries could be deployed and local officials could be kidnapped. Washington says Moscow wants to install pro-Russian puppet leaders.
We believe that Moscow may be setting the stage to use a chemical weapon and then falsely blame Ukraine to justify escalating its attacks on the Ukrainian people. Manufacturing events and creating false narratives of genocide to justify greater use of military force is a tactic that Russia has used before, including in Georgia. We believe Russia will bring its mercenaries from private military groups and foreign countries to Ukraine.
Russia will bring mercenaries to Ukraine. Blinken could be referring to this. 1,000 Chechens are joining the Russian forces in Ukraine. Reports say they have volunteered to fight for Russia. Earlier this week, some videos emerged. There are Chechen fighters. As you can see, a man is addressing them. He is Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov. On the radio, he was speaking to Adam Delimkhanov. Delimkhanov is a member of the Russian State Duma. Here's another video. It shows Chechen fighters in a room. There are Russian and Chechen flags on the wall. So with more fighters entering the battleground, will the Ukraine war intensify? What about the talks? They haven't borne fruit yet. That's update number 7. Ukraine's defense minister is leading the negotiations for Kiev. Today he said that lawyers are drafting a peace deal, but only Moscow can make a breakthrough possible. What does Ukraine want from Russia? A ceasefire. They want the bombing to stop. Russia is yet to commit to a ceasefire. Ukraine is desperate. It's running out of food. Update number 8. The United Nations World Food Programme is sounding an alarm. The food supply chains in Ukraine are collapsing. That's because the bombing and fighting is destroying infrastructure. Many grocery stores and warehouses are already empty. Ukraine seems helpless and out of options. Its people are suffering all kinds of horrors. Update number 9. Russian forces have been accused of raping and executing elderly women. Ukrainian lawmakers have made these claims. 4 of them have briefed British lawmakers in London about this. These charges are serious. They must be investigated by an independent agency. Ukraine has been lobbying the West for more help. It is planning for the long haul, which means training more civilians to fight. Update number 10. Ukraine has sought help from the US again. They want funding, training and weapons. What for? A long-term resistance movement against Russia. This could include supporting volunteer formations of civilian fighters. An insurgency, basically. Traditional wars were won by putting more boots on the ground, and Ukraine needs a bigger fighting force to take on the mighty Russian army. But this is not a traditional war. It is being fought on the battlefield as well as on the World Wide Web. And the ground offensive, you could say, is easier to track. You can see the soldiers, you can see the tanks, you can see who's winning and who's not. But what about the digital offensive? That's a lot harder. For starters, we don't know what is real anymore. Take a look at this video. What do you see? President Zelensky of Ukraine addressing the media. The same green t-shirt, the same background, classic Zelensky. This video was broadcast on Ukrainian TV. But the viewers were in for a surprise, because in this video, Zelensky was not condemning Russia. He was not calling for peace. He was asking his soldiers to surrender. I know it's shocking, except this is not the real Zelensky. This is a deep fake video. It was broadcast on Ukraine TV by Russian hackers. If you look closely, you can notice the difference. His head is too big, his neck is too stiff. Plus, there is a difference in skin tone. Ukrainian viewers were quick to realize this. Their experts immediately busted the deep fake. Zelensky himself addressed the issue on Instagram. He called it a childish provocation. In this case, he's right. This deep fake was not a good attempt. Cyber experts are calling it a cheap fake. Within hours, Facebook, Twitter and YouTube got it removed. But what if the attempt was better? What if the deep fake was more sophisticated? Well, that is the big worry for both sides. Before we discuss this tech war, let's cover the basics. What exactly is a deep fake? Simply put, it's an artificial media. You can put someone's face on another person's body. You can make them do anything, admit to crimes, spread fake news, anything you want. It's like photoshopping on steroids. This video should give you a better idea.
Killmonger was right. Or Ben Carson is in the sunken place. Or, how about this? Simply, President Trump is a total and complete. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. That's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of dystopia. Thank you.
I'm sure you figured that. That wasn't the real Obama, but in that case, it was a prank. There were no real stakes. In Ukraine, things are very different. Volodymyr Zelensky is the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces. His deep fakes can influence this war. And Russia is notorious for disinformation campaigns, fake news, propaganda reels, deep fakes. The Kremlin has aced all of it. But they're not the only ones to do this. The history of disinformation is as old as the history of war. I can give you many examples. Here's one from the Second World War. The Allies were planning the invasion of Sicily in 1943. But they needed to draw the Germans away. So what did they do? They procured a random dead body, dressed it up as a British captain, and dropped it near the coast of Spain. How did that help? You see, the dead body was planted with fake British documents. Those documents hinted at an invasion of Greece, not Sicily. So the Germans sent all their reinforcements to Greece and Sicily was captured easily. Long story short, disinformation worked in 1943. And remember, that was rudimentary stuff. Today's technology makes disinformation much more dangerous. Teenagers in a basement could make deep fakes. This one of Zelensky was busted. The next one may not. And it's not just Russia. The West is also waging a disinformation war. Take this video, for instance. Again, what do you see? President Putin giving one of his typical addresses, except the content is shocking. In this video, Putin says Russia has surrendered. He's asking Russian soldiers to leave Ukraine. Needless to say, it's a deep fake. Now, some of these videos are easy to spot. You can make out the edited portion, whether it's the facial expressions, the skin tone, or even gestures. But this process takes time. Ask Britain's Defense Secretary Ben Wallace. He spent 9 minutes on a video call with a deep-fake Ukrainian Prime Minister. It was choreographed perfectly. The call came from another government department. It seemed quite genuine. It was requested in the name of a Ukrainian embassy official. So Ben Wallace ended up speaking to this deep-fake for 9 whole minutes. How did he realize the truth? When the conversation turned fishy, the deepfake Prime Minister asked Ben Wallace 3 questions. Was Britain planning deployments to the Black Sea? Is Ukraine willing to drop its NATO bid? And should Ukraine get nuclear weapons? Wallace realized something was off. Within seconds, he cut the call. And he wasn't alone. Something similar happened to Preeti Patel, the Home Secretary. These incidents reveal 2 problems. Number 1, the land of James Bond is losing its edge. And number 2, Russia is stepping up its disinformation campaign. Targeting 2 NATO ministers is not everyday propaganda. Does this mean Russia is getting desperate? Or was this digital offensive always part of the plan? Either way, it's a wake-up call for everyone. We used to say, see it to believe it. Well, not anymore. Now it is see it, analyze it, run it through a computer, and then believe it. Speaking of beliefs, some countries believe they can solve the Ukraine crisis, or at least help in solving the crisis. They believe they can broker peace and put an end to this conflict. These countries enjoy close ties with both Russia and Ukraine, the likes of Israel, Turkey, now even South Africa. They're all trying to mediate between Ukraine and Russia. But are their efforts working? Here's a report.
The war in Ukraine has entered its fourth week. Ceasefire talks haven't delivered. There are no signs of truce and no dearth of mediators. More and more countries are offering to broker peace. Leading the effort are three unlikely players: Israel, South Africa, and Turkey. South Africa says it has been approached to play a mediation role, but it did not clarify who approached it, Russia or Ukraine. Some reports say South Africa has pitched itself for the role, but there are questions about its neutrality. Its official position has changed several times. Last month, South Africa's International Relations Department called on Russia to withdraw its forces from Ukraine. Since then, the call has been removed from official statements. President Cyril Ramaphosa has taken a softer stance. He has gone to the extent of blaming this crisis on NATO, a statement that could hurt his country's role as mediator.
The war could have been avoided if NATO had heeded the warnings from amongst its own leaders and officials over the years that its eastward expansion would lead to greater, not less, instability in the region.
Mediator number 2 is Turkey, a strong ally of Russia, also a member of NATO. It buys both US and Russian weaponry and enjoys close ties with Kiev and Moscow. Turkey is playing both sides. Last week, Turkey hosted the foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine. The talks achieved very little. Now, Turkey has offered to host the presidents of both countries. The offer is yet to be acknowledged, forget being accepted. And the fact that Ukraine is still using Turkish drones in this war doesn't help Erdogan's case.
We have to maintain our friendship with Mr. Zelensky and Mr. Putin. But let me say that when it comes to sanctions, we did whatever was necessary within the framework of United Nations. We have given support to Ukraine despite Russia, something NATO member countries did not do.
Mediator number 3 is Israel. Last week, the Israeli Prime Minister secretly traveled to Moscow. He is said to have attended a 3-hour meeting at the Kremlin. The aim, he said, was to find a middle ground. Only that none was found. But Israel's efforts continue. The Israeli media says these efforts could backfire. Senior members of Israel's ruling coalition are upset. They feel such efforts could have negative repercussions, especially if Israel manages to broker a deal where Putin achieves more than the West. This is a legitimate risk for all mediators as they wade into the troubled waters of Ukraine.
If you think South Africa mediating is surprising, listen to this. Joe Biden wants China's help to isolate Russia. It's mission impossible, but Biden is trying anyway. Earlier today, he spoke to Xi Jinping. The call lasted for nearly 2 hours. It was their first phone call after the war broke out. Expectations were low. Both sides wanted to size each other up. Biden would have been looking for signs of support, any indication that China will not help Russia. Xi Jinping would have been looking for the opposite. Where does Joe Biden draw the red line? At what point could China get caught in the sanctions crossfire? There are two big takeaways from these talks. Number one, Biden still doesn't get China's real intentions. He wants to compete with Xi Jinping, but he lacks the killer instincts. Listen to these remarks by Biden's press secretary.
There's been of course, rhetorical support or the absence of clear rhetoric and denunciation, or the absence of denunciation by China of what Russia is doing. This flies in the face, of course, of everything China stands for, including the basic principles of the UN Charter, including the basic principles of respect for sovereignty of nations.
How naive is that? In case you missed it, I'll repeat. Russia's invasion flies in the face of everything China stands for. Does it, though? Attacking a sovereign country is exactly China's brand. They've tried it with India. They've tried it in the South China Sea. So the White House has got it completely wrong, I have to say, unless this is part of a larger strategy. Sweet talk Xi Jinping, go soft on China and hope that favor will be reciprocated. That China will help America isolate Russia. Like I said, it's mission impossible. This move could backfire for Joe Biden. I know there's a war in Europe, but the Indo-Pacific remains the #1 battleground. The future will be decided not in Ukraine, it will be decided in the waters of the Indo-Pacific. And I know it sounds heartless, but that is the reality. So Biden needs to get his priorities in order. Putin may win the war in Ukraine, but his economy is finished. There is no way Russia can challenge or topple the global order. China, on the other hand, can do both. So Biden needs to take a call. Does he tackle the declining rogue state that is Russia? Or does he tackle the growing rival that is China? America's Pacific allies will be closely watching. The likes of Australia, Japan and South Korea, they've joined Western sanctions against Russia, not because the war affects them, but because they need America's help against China. That could change if Joe Biden goes soft on Beijing. Which brings us to takeaway number 2. China's position may not be as strong as we think. Politically, they're all in. They're accusing America of making bioweapons. They're condemning Western sanctions. But there is very little material support. No military aid, no economic assistance, only moral support. What explains this cautious approach? The short answer is money. And these numbers should give you a better idea. China's trade with Russia is $147 billion. China's trade with the West is $1.6 trillion. That's 10 times more. If Xi Jinping helps Putin, Chinese companies could face sanctions. And this fear is already taking its toll. Earlier this week, China's stock markets registered their worst drop since 2008. Nearly $1.1 trillion in market value was wiped out. One of the reasons was this, the fear of sanctions. Immediately, Foreign Minister Wang Yi issued a clarification. He said China is not party to the war. China does not want to be affected by sanctions. But this does not mean that Xi Jinping will isolate Putin or that he will cool off on political support. This means Xi Jinping is playing the long game. He is building alternatives in the SWIFT banking system. He is de-dollarizing his economy. He's building ties with traditional US partners like Saudi Arabia. What he needs is time to build up China's strength to challenge the US. And right now, Biden is playing right into Xi Jinping's hands. He's slowing down his Pacific pivot. He's putting all his focus into Europe. Yet European solidarity is not a guarantee. You see, condemnations are easy. So is political rhetoric. The question is, how do you back it up? How do you walk the talk? On that, Europe is still divided. On one side is Western Europe, countries like France, Italy and Germany. They're rich, they're influential, and they run the show in Brussels. On the other side is Eastern Europe, countries like Poland, the Baltic states. Their finances are modest. They're new entries into the European Union, and they play a supporting role in Brussels. Where do these camps stand on Ukraine? The Western camp is all talk. They claim to be supporting Ukraine, but they're still importing Russian gas. They're still speaking to Vladimir Putin. The Eastern camp is a lot more active. Poland has welcomed almost 2 million refugees from Ukraine. Slovakia is offering S-300 missiles. Clearly, the Eastern states are walking the talk. But the biggest difference is on Ukraine's EU membership. It was clear at the Versailles summit last week. Listen in.
I think it's extremely important that we, as the Union, could take this decision to have a very clear signal that we want Ukraine to join the Union.
EU accession of Ukraine is something for the long term, if at all. It's now up to the Commission to assess the membership application, and then for the Council to take a view on this, but that will take months, maybe years.
What explains this divide? Three things: geography, history, and economy. Eastern European states are closer to Russia, so the war has a direct impact on them. More refugees at their border, more weapons on their soil. Basically, there's more risk. Compare that to Western Europe. They're insulated from the war rather, which means fewer refugees, fewer weapons, and away from Russia's radar. The second reason is history. Western Europe has a colonial past. Whether it's France, Germany, Spain, or Portugal, they're used to invading, not being invaded. Eastern Europe has a very different past. They were attacked by Nazi Germany. Some of them were part of the Soviet Union. So Eastern Europe understands what Ukraine is going through. Hence their support. The third reason is economy. Western Europe is clearly putting money over principles. They want to keep buying Russian gas. They want access to the Russian market. So the likes of Macron and Olaf Scholz keep reaching out. They're still trying to appease Putin at some level. And it's not just about this war. It's about the bigger picture for them. How does Europe deal with bullies like Russia and China? Western Europe prefers concessions. They're not under direct threat, so they don't bother. Eastern Europe prefers a tougher stance. We told you about Lithuania's campaign against China. It's the perfect example. All Baltic states stood up for Lithuania, but Western Europe wanted to avoid conflict with Beijing. This divide makes the EU irrelevant, sort of like a sitting duck. Any decision in the EU needs full solidarity. All 27 members must sign off. And right now, that is not happening. Not on sanctions, not on Ukraine's membership, not on Russian gas. It's a crucial moment in the grand European experiment. The idea was to bind the continent together, a single market, a single currency, and in the long run, who knows, maybe a single defense and foreign policy. But with these divisions, that's not happening. And I know what you're thinking. Why is this a turning point for the EU? Why would Brussels invite a war-torn nation on Russia's doorsteps? After all, joining the EU means a lot of commitments, open borders, common rules, anti-corruption norms. Ukraine is not ready for any of this. Having said that, Europe offered hope. They said Ukraine was part of the European family. They said Ukraine was standing up for European values. Listen to this.
The Ukrainian people are showing immense courage. And a people that stands up so bravely for European values is clearly part of the European family of nations.
Well, that's a strange way of treating your family. Right now, Europe wants it both ways. It cannot be seen as abandoning Ukraine. At the same time, it does not want to embrace Ukraine. And where does that leave Kiev? With many friends, but no family. Well, one man is trying to unite a divided Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron. Can he reform the European Union? For that, he needs to win an election first. Next month, France will hold its presidential election. Macron has announced his re-election bid. The war in Ukraine has boosted his prospects. In the opinion polls, Macron is miles ahead of his rivals. But will that be good enough for a win? Our next report has some answers.
President Emmanuel Macron has a spring in his step. A few days ago, he announced his candidacy for the presidential election.
J'ai une dernière question, Monsieur le Président. Est-ce que dorénavant, je peux vous appeler Monsieur le candidat?
Oui, bien sûr. Vous êtes là pour le candidat. Donc, appelez-moi Monsieur le candidat, il n'y a aucun problème.
Candidate Macron certainly has the advantage. Opinion polls put him right at the top. 30% of the French voters back a second term for Macron. None of the other candidates have managed to mount a serious challenge. The reason is the war in Ukraine. It has strengthened Macron's hand at home. Voters often seek stability during war, and the citizens of France are no different. They overwhelmingly approve of Macron's response. A poll has found that 59% of the voters think the French president has risen to the challenge. Macron has projected himself as an effective mediator in the conflict. He met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, also Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev. Macron is also leading Europe's response. The French president has been one of the most visible leaders during this conflict. He also knows how to make the most of this in his campaign. Macron hasn't hesitated in dropping some names while engaging with voters.
Tomorrow I will speak with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Before seeing you, I was on the phone with President Joe Biden. Tomorrow I'll be on the phone with President Xi Jinping. We will continue this work.
There is another factor that's helping Macron, the credentials of his rivals. Before the invasion in Ukraine, right-wing leader Marine Le Pen was considered a serious challenger. Not anymore. Many voters now see her as a Russian sympathizer. The reason is her connection to a Russian bank. Le Pen wanted funds to contest an election in 2014. The first Czech-Russian bank stepped up to help. They extended a loan of more than $12 million to Le Pen. The bank went bust soon after. Le Pen didn't win the election. She settled her debts in a court in a rather public fashion. That stain of Russian debt is now dragging her political career down. In September last year, 22% of the French voters supported Le Pen. She was just 2% behind Macron. That difference has now widened by 11%. Just 17% of the voters are now willing to vote for Le Pen. France will choose its next president on the 10th of April. If the current trend holds, Macron is guaranteed a second term. But domestic issues like taxes, immigration, and labor reforms would still hurt him. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
We turn to Pakistan now, where political temperatures are rising, courtesy a no-confidence motion. 10 days back, Pakistan's opposition tabled this motion with little support. We told you about it. 10 days on, their chances of success are way better. And I'll tell you why. At least 24 lawmakers from the ruling party, Prime Minister Imran Khan's party, are leaving him. They've threatened to vote against the Prime Minister, 24. The list includes Jahangir Tareen, former Secretary General of the PTI, Raja Riaz, a former Parliamentary Secretary of the PTI, Wajiha Qamar, a current Parliamentary Secretary in the PTI, Noor Alam Khan, a former advisor to Imran Khan, and Basit Bukhari, a member of Pakistan's National Assembly. All of these lawmakers, along with others, have threatened to vote against Imran Khan. They're currently lodged at a resort in Islamabad, the palatial Sindh House. What are they doing there? Saving themselves from the government action, we are told. They say that their party has declared them traitors and that their lives are under threat.
डॉक्टर साहब यहाँ पे नहीं है जी नहीं वो गद्दार हो गया है वो पीटीआई के वोटों के ऊपर आया है वो गद्दारी कर रहा है वो नून लीग में जा रहा है ये पार्लियामेंट लॉजेस की बात है परसों रिसेप्शनिस्ट ने खुद मेरी वाइफ से बात कराई है उसके बाद मेरी वाइफ ने मुझे फोन किया है कौन लोग थे पीटीआई के पार्टी से गद्दारी कर रहा है आप उन्हें जानते हैं मैं नहीं जानता मैं तो था ही नहीं मैं थरपार अच्छा ठीक है उसके बाद क्या हुआ उसके बाद मैंने किसी के थ्रू चीफ मिनिस्टर को अप्रोच किया है कि मुझे ये सिंध हाउस के अंदर जो है वो एक कमरा चाहिए
कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ऑफ पाकिस्तान चीफ जस्टिस से मैं इस्लामाबाद हाई कोर्ट के चीफ जस्टिस से मैं चीफ इलेक्शन कमिश्नर से और मैं यहाँ के इंतजामिया से कि हर एक को चाहे वो हुकूमत के हक में हो चाहे मुखालिफत में हो चाहे वो वोट डाले नहीं डाले उसको नेशनल असेंबली ऑफ पाकिस्तान तक वहाँ पे तहफ़्फ़ुज़ दिया जाए.
The government of Pakistan says these lawmakers have been bribed. It says they've quote-unquote sold their souls for money. It has accused them of horse trading and vowed to take strong action against them.
जिस तरीके से यहाँ पे मंडियाँ लगाई गई हैं और ज़ाहिर है वाइन के भी खिलाफ हैं मुल्क के भी वो मुस्तकबिल से खेलने वाली बात है इसलिए हम इसके ऊपर एक स्ट्रॉन्ग एक्शन जो है वो प्लान कर रहे हैं.
सर क्या हुकूमत जो अपोजिशन कह रही है कि इस पर आप रेड करने जा रहे हैं ठीक है तो इसका मतलब
रेड का नहीं पता लेकिन इस पे देखेंगे इस पे सख्त एक्शन होगा.
So what kind of strong action is the PTI mulling? We don't know, but the opposition says PTI is planning to raid the Sindh House and take these lawmakers hostage. One such raid, in fact, took place this evening. Some PTI workers tried breaking into the Sindh House. The Pakistan government has said that it did not send them. It has also promised to punish them. The opposition says the government is lying. Look at this post from Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. He says these dissidents are being threatened with violence, arrest and dire consequences. He says their lives and the liberty of their families are also under threat. As the war of words escalates, the Human Rights Watch has also issued a warning. It says Pakistan's democratic institutions are facing a threat and that the no-confidence vote has set the stage for a violent confrontation. Well, such are the fears of violence that a cricket match scheduled between Pakistan and Australia, which was supposed to be held in Rawalpindi, has now been moved to Lahore. The Interior Minister of Pakistan says this has been done in light of the recent political activities, quote-unquote.
Deciding today that the respectable and honourable Australian team, we have given them presidential security. And the presidential security has its certain requirements. And for that security which we give head of the state, which we have given to Australian team, that's why the 4 matches we have shifted to Lahore, because here there are political activities.
So PTI leaders have broken ranks. The opposition says there could be violence. Global bodies are predicting turmoil. Cricket matches are being rescheduled. Where is all this headed? Only 3 days are left for the no-confidence motion. The final vote will be held on Monday, that is the 21st of March. The opposition needs 172 votes to dethrone Imran Khan. 172, that's the magic number. How many seats does the opposition have right now? 62. How many seats does Imran Khan's party, the PTI, have? 177. How many PTI lawmakers are planning to vote against the Prime Minister? 24. That's way more than what the opposition needs. Do the math. Simply put, on the 21st of March, Imran Khan's tenure as Pakistan's Prime Minister could come to an end. 3 days is all he has to whip up a miracle. We'll be watching this story, needless to say. For the moment, we take you to New Zealand, where more than 24 whales have died in a mass stranding. It happened this week. The deaths happened at a remote beach, the same beach that has witnessed over 10 whale strandings in the last 15 years. Why are so many whales dying in New Zealand? Well, no one has been able to come up with an explanation. Here's a report.
These are the pilot whales of New Zealand. 29 of them were found dead this week at an island. Mass stranding here is a regular affair. But no one has been able to figure out why these whales are dying. Pilot whales are among the most common species of whales in New Zealand. They are susceptible to mass strandings, especially at this infamous beach. It is called Farewell Spit. The beach stretches for about 29 kilometers. It has one of the longest sand spits in New Zealand. It's a narrow point of sandy land that dips into the sea. In the last 15 years, Farewell Spit has witnessed as many as 10 whale strandings. The worst one happened in 2017. Close to 700 whales had beached. Nearly 250 of them died. Scientists are not sure why this beach is so deadly for whales. All they have is a theory. Scientists believe that the sand spit creates a shallow seabed. This could possibly interfere with the sonar navigation of whales. Whales make sounds to navigate the waters, and these sounds bounce back from objects and help the whales determine their path. Regular rescue groups have tried their best to save these whales. Last year, they were able to save 28 of them, but 22 more whales still beached. Without any explanation for the mass strandings, the cycle of death is likely to continue at this infamous beach. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And before we wrap, here's wishing all of you a very happy Holi once again. After 2 long years, a lot more people in India celebrated this festival without major restrictions. Naturally, the celebrations were grander. WION attended one such celebration in the holy city of Vrindavan. Here's a report on what we saw.
Traditions, togetherness, celebrations. And lots of color. This is how India celebrated Holi, the festival of colors. A day that marks the triumph of good over evil, with lots of vibrant hues. From the elderly to the young, Indians from all walks of life and age groups celebrated this festival. WION visited one such holy celebration at the famous Banki Bihari temple in Vrindavan, a historic city located in the Mathura district of Uttar Pradesh.
So we are in the Banki Bihari temple right now. I just took a round into the middle of the most crowded area in the temple, and I was relatively white when I went in there. Now I'm full of color, so I feel like I fit in a little bit better. This is super, super crowded.
Every year, thousands of devotees descend on this city, soak themselves in color and dance to the drumbeats. The celebrations begin a day earlier with the Holika Dahan ceremony. People gather around a bonfire and perform rituals. There are also holy treats to tickle your taste buds. Flavorful delicacies that are rooted in tradition. Gujia and thandai are the most sought after.
One gujia, please. Thank you. This one is the most famous. It's a deep-fried dumpling, and it's very sweet.
What makes the celebration in Vrindavan even more special is the participation of revelers from all over the world.
This is my temple, my Jakarta's temple.
Yeah?
So I'm celebrating here, and I came outside today, and everyone's joined as well. Not my fault, they do this anyways.
Do you stay here full time?
No, I'm only visiting for Holi. Nice to meet you. Ram Ram.
Ram Ram.
Holi may be a riot of colors, but for many, this festival holds a deeper value. It marks the arrival of spring and is celebrated as an offering to the gods for a good harvest. The festival also marks the triumph of good over evil, when Holika was slayed by Lord Vishnu. This festival also celebrates togetherness. It unites Indians from all walks of lives and backgrounds in drenching themselves in color and happiness.
And now let's take a look at what else made news headlines around the world. It's time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
4 missiles hit an aircraft maintenance facility in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv earlier in the day, destroying its buildings, says the governor. Separately, Ukraine's military says the facility was struck by cruise missile launches from the direction of the Black Sea. Britain's communications regulator revokes the license of Russia's state broadcaster RT with immediate effect amid investigations into its coverage of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Authorities in Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, say that 60 civilians, including 4 children, have died in the city since Russia began its assault more than 3 weeks ago. Norway has announced that it would provide an additional 3 billion Norwegian kroner or $340 million this year to strengthen its military forces in the north near the Russian border. Israel appeals to the United States to not remove Iran's Revolutionary Guards from its blacklist of foreign terrorist organizations as part of a revived nuclear deal. China's southern tech powerhouse Shenzhen has partially eased lockdown measures after President Xi Jinping stressed on the need to minimize the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the nation's economy. The Australian watchdog sues Facebook owner Meta over scam advertisements. It has accused Meta of failing to do enough to stop scam ads for cryptocurrency or money-making schemes, even after being alerted. And the European Space Agency confirms that it is indefinitely suspending its ExoMars rover mission with Russia's state space corporation partner Roscosmos in line with sanctions levied on Kremlin because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Reigning champions Chelsea have been drawn against 13-time winners Real Madrid in the quarter-finals of this season's Champions League. English champions Manchester City will face Spanish champions Atletico Madrid. 6-time winners Liverpool will take on Portuguese club Benfica, while fellow 6-time champions Bayern Munich will play Villarreal. The Court of Arbitration for Sports has rejected Russia's appeal against FIFA's decision to suspend the national team from international competitions. The decision rules Russia out of the World Cup playoff semi-final against Poland next week. The ban will remain in force till a full hearing is conducted.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.